never been more important than it is right now. I want to acknowledge the Leon Polk Smith Foundation, the Luce Foundation, and the Carl and Marilyn Thoma Foundation for their support of this exhibition, as well as the catalog for this exhibition, which is available for sale at Books and More, or you can buy it online. Truly a gorgeous catalog, and lots of new scholarship on the subject. It's my pleasure to introduce Diana Pardue, our chief curator, and Joe Baker. I want to, of course, thank Diana for all the work that she's done on this exhibition, and particularly on the publication. Diana is just, she's such a treasure and so invaluable to the work that the Herd does. Now, many of you will know Joe Baker from his time at the Herd Museum. He predated my time at the Herd. He was, of course, a living legend when I got here. I'm happy to say that it has been such a pleasure and a privilege to work with Joe on this exhibition. I hope he agrees. We've had a lot of fun working together. I think that it's certainly been a successful collaboration. And with that, I am going to turn it over to Joe and Diana.
Thank you, David. It's my great pleasure to introduce Joe today. And Joe brought a unique perspective to the exhibition. He grew up in Oklahoma, like Leon Polk Smith. And like Smith, he was an artist. He's worked as an educator. Joe is enrolled with the Delaware Nation. He has worked as a curator, just as with this exhibit, but he's also been a museum director, and currently he is the director of the Mashantucket Pequot Museum. I think Joe, it's just great. It's been my great pleasure to work with you on this project and to have that opportunity to collaborate on this project. And I think, Joe, we're going to start perhaps with you telling us something about Leon Polk Smith and his life and career.
Well, thank you so much, Diana Pardue. It's a pleasure to be united again with you in the curatorial way. It's been a great pleasure working with you. I want to begin by echoing an earlier comment about acknowledging and paying respect to the land of the ancestral Sonoran Desert people, today's Acamil O'odham, Tana O'odham, and Peepash Maricopa communities. You know, I'm thinking about the fact that I spent almost 30 years in the Phoenix creative community working, and the Herd was very much a part of that time in Arizona. So I have fond remembrances of being at the Herd, working with you in curatorial, certainly Gina Lasco and Wendy Weston in education. I remember the Native American seniors, the Native American Student Guides program, that Native Foods Garden we had adjacent to Dorrance Education Center, and of course, the spectacular, amazing Herd Guild. So tonight, I'm thinking that we in many ways can be welcomed by the spirit of the Herd Guild. And I'm especially remembering the late Elaine Weston, Phyllis Noon, and Andy Eisenberg. So with that, let's begin to explore the life and times of this artist, Leon Polk Smith. Who is this man? Next slide, please. The portrait that you see here of Leon Polk Smith was taken in his studio in the 1940s in Union Square, New York City. And, you know, using his own words, which you see there, I grew up in the Southwest where the colors of nature were pure and rampart, where my Indian neighbors and relatives used color to vibrate and shock, the artist's words. And in addition to that, this is really important. I spent 40 years of my life in Oklahoma, and it has a warm place in my heart and is everywhere in my paintings. I give all the credit to Oklahoma. And if you think about that, place is so significant to each of us. It becomes a part of our DNA. It's the land, the water, the sky. It informs everything we do and gives us direction and purpose for our life. Next, please. Next slide. This is a historic photo of the Smith family in Oklahoma, taken in 1908. Smith was born in 1906 in Chickasha, Oklahoma, a year before statehood. And he would become one of America's great 20th century artists. Considered one of the founders of the hard-edge style of abstract art, Leon Polk Smith rose to prominence in the 1960s with his distinctive shaped canvases called the Correspondences and Constellations. Smith was much celebrated during this time and continues to be celebrated today. One of 9 children born to William and Samantha Smith, the artist knew intimately the hot summers plagued by drought and winters of ice. The land was mostly flat, with fields stretching to the horizon, a landscape of extremes, prone to tornadoes, floods, and rattlesnakes. His parents lived in the wildness of the nation's western migration. Said to be of Cherokee ancestry, they and their children carved out a hardscrabble life on the edge of manifest destiny. The area was populated primarily by the Chickasaw and Choctaw. However, other tribes, area tribes such as the absentee Shawnee, Citizen, Potawatomi, Caddo, Delaware, Seminole, Sac and Fox, Kickapoo, and Cherokee were in and out of the area. Together, these communities overcame the difficult struggle for survival through their unique cultures. Next slide, please. It's a painting by Ernest Spybuck, a Shawnee artist. And I think it depicts the lifeways of tribal communities in a very spectacular and readable way. So when we encounter this painting, I think it's important to remember that this probably is a very accurate depiction of what Leon Polk Smith may have encountered in visiting the dances and social occasions of neighboring tribes. Next, please. The Bull, 1938. This is a transitional moment for the artist. Smith's early work was figurative, as you see here expressed. This painting being an example of that figurative work from 1938, the year he graduates from Columbia University. Many of the early works on paper are now in the collection of the OSU Museum of Art in Stillwater, Oklahoma. Next, please. Oklahoma Territory, a very, very important painting in the collection, the permanent collection of the Brooklyn Museum of Art, calls to mind an aerial view of the Oklahoma landscape. So let's think a bit about the history of Indian Territory and Oklahoma Territory. In 1830, Congress passed the Indian Removal Act in response to the Indian problem, which authorized the United States to set aside lands west of the Mississippi for tribes. Following in 1834, Indian Territory was created, what we now know as modern-day Oklahoma. Within less than 5 decades, more than 60 tribes had forcibly relocated to Indian Territory. In 1907, with the establishment of statehood, Oklahoma assumed jurisdiction over all territory, and much of Oklahoma fell in the hands of white settlers and entrepreneurs with the discovery of oil. The Allotment Act of 1887 the Dawes Act, awarded to heads of household for Native people 160 acres of land, 80 acres of land to single persons over the age of 18, and 40 acres to persons under the age of 18. The land was to be held in trust for a period of 25 years. Then the individual would be given clear title and citizenship. But of course, things changed. and that became a very muddy and contentious area for Indian people in Oklahoma. Next, please. Homage to Victory Boogie Woogie, 1946. Leon Polk Smith's work is often compared to the Dutch painter Mondrian, who Smith actually celebrated in a series of tributes to the Dutch painter. This very important painting, significant painting, is in the collection of the Dallas Museum of Art. And we at the Herd are very happy and pleased that this loan was made for the purpose of hiding in plain sight. Mondrian left Europe and moved to New York City in the 1940s, just because of World War II. And the painting, Victory Boogie Woogie by Mondrian, the unfinished painting was completed, not completed, it was unfinished in 1944. And it was a painting in anticipation of the Allied victory of World War II. Although Smith never met Mondrian, he nevertheless celebrated him through several tributes. And this painting could be interpreted, think about it, as the bird's eye view of the urban landscape from a skyscraper. Smith often commented that New York City reminded him of the mountains and canyons of the Southwest. Next, please. Okemah. Okemah is actually the name, spelled differently, of a town in Oklahoma. In the 1940s, Smith was looking at some athletic catalogs, examining drawings of baseballs and tennis balls. He began to imagine that these simple shapes could create a new kind of space. It was flat and at the same time curved. By introducing a single curved line, Smith created both positive and negative space. The S curve, or the double curve, can also be found in many, many examples of Native American beadwork. Next slide, please. This past fall or late summer, August of 2020, I had the great pleasure of visiting Leon Polk Smith's studio on the Gold Coast of Long Island, Shoreham, New York. We found several notebooks, in fact, that had never been seen or published in a cardboard box in the corner of the studio. And needless to say, I was excited beyond belief that these treasures by the artist hand were actually before us. It's interesting to see, and in you as a visitor to Hiding in Plain Sight will have occasion to really look at the different pages of the notebooks. This one in particular is about the painting Nowata, which was done in 1956. Nowata is a town name in northeastern Oklahoma. It's actually a Lenape word meaning I know it. Smith often titled his work using spellings of Oklahoma towns derived from native language. So we see this thread consistently throughout his productive period of art making practice. You also see the meticulous quality of the artist. He's analytical, he's precise, he's meticulous, he's almost fussy with his detail. And that transfers to that hard edge painting that you encounter in the galleries. Next, please. Diana has made some really interesting connections to this particular painting. And Diana, can you share those with us now?
Oh, thank you, Joe. Well, you know, David referenced the catalog that accompanies the book, and it was just a really wonderful opportunity for us to take a close look at this artist's life and his work. For me, I was interested in a time period when he had a Solomon Guggenheim scholarship to work, and he chose to work in Santa Fe, New Mexico. So I just wanted to look at that little microcosm of time, and it was so fun because Santa Fe was a town of about 20,000 people at the time, and so if someone new arrived in town, the newspaper would announce that, and there were several really interesting newspaper articles about Leon Polk Smith, the work he was doing. He submitted work in the New Mexico State Fair in Albuquerque. He had his work exhibited at the Fine Art Museum in Santa Fe. And we also thought, you know, he's right there with the artist community. And there was a bit written about the other artists, but he also was enmeshed with indigenous artists in the area. And this work, which of course, when you see it in person, it's just amazing because it has a very matte black areas and it has very shiny black areas. And it wasn't until I was standing in the gallery with David Roche and looking at the work, and he mentioned Maria and Julian's pottery, that it just became so clear that this was seeing that work. And of course, in the 1940s, they were in the heyday of really, you know, this period of time when their work was blossoming and so well appreciated. And then some few years later, he paints this work black on black. And I also just want to mention, in reference to the catalog, we had contributions by wonderful scholars, Heather Ottone, Dwayna McKay, and Dana Miller, who made these wonderful new contributions to scholarship. So I think that in terms of being a very attractive catalog because of the design that PS Studio did, also this new scholarship will shed some light on particular aspects of Leon Smith's career. So thank you, Joe, for giving me that opportunity.
Thank you, Diana. Let's go to the next slide, please. Cherokee Sunrise. Wow, I love this piece. And I love it because for me, I can see direct correlations between the positive and negative shapes in this work and Delaware beadwork. These floral, these abstract floral motifs are commonly found in Delaware beadwork designs. Also, when you encounter this work in person, the scale of the work, it's a very powerful piece, and it's very distinctive. Next slide, please. This is a Delaware Bandolier Bag and from a private collection in Portland. It's from that very high productive period, 1850s. The bag was actually collected in Texas and has been in private hands since the turn of the century. in one family particularly. You can see the characteristic broad straps, which are characteristic of Delaware beadwork, and those abstract floral motifs, which are not far away from Cherokee sunrise. Next slide, please. Constellation, yellow, blue, and violet, 1972. Beginning in the about 1967, in fact, Smith began to introduce multiple panels. And these multiple part constellation series are among his most exuberant and inventive compositions. And it's probably what he is best known and celebrated for. Some become very complex. And Diana can speak to, because Diana has had the advantage of seeing the backside of Inca, and she can tell us about, again, of the artist's hand and his expression and focus on detail. Next slide. There it is, Inca 1970. Diana, what's on the backside of those panels, and how many panels are there?
Well, I had to count today. I know Kristen Coughlin, our registrar, knows exactly how many panels, but the interesting thing, you know, we see the finished product or what's on the front when we visit an exhibit, but as these were being installed by Kristen and the preparator, Joseph Kalasinki, it was really fun to see what was on the reverse side. And I was telling Joe earlier that it looks like Leon Polk Smith either stenciled his name or he had this very precise printing. But there are several works in the exhibition in which he is exacting in terms of how they will be arranged, the order, the positioning, and even for one work, the height of the piece. This is a really complex piece. It has 48 individual canvases, and each canvas is attached to the other with like a nut and a bolt. It's amazing. And I was also commenting, he was working with someone who was really quite talented in terms of just creating these canvases and stretching them to the shapes that he desired, because they're all unusual shapes. This is not a square. I mean, the edges are rounded off. And this came in 4 separate parts. So it traveled with a panel of, what would that, 12 parts that then would, in the gallery, was bolted to another panel, and then they were positioned on the wall side by side. But I really appreciated your comment, Joe, about his exactitude, looking at the notebooks. And you mentioned that although we couldn't actually have an actual notebook in the exhibit, we did make a selection of individual pages. And usually at times he would just write on one page and the opposite page would be blank, but at times he would either have a photograph or a drawing on both sides. So we made a selection of individual pages based on photographs that the Leon Polk Smith Foundation so kindly provided. And these are on a monitor in the gallery, and so people can actually stand and watch them progress. We have them moving so that you have a good bit of time to look at some of those details. Usually he would write the date that the piece was made. He would indicate all the different locations where it would travel. Sometimes you see that he made changes in color, and he would mark through color selections. And there's even one where he had the drawing horizontal, and then it looks like he changed his mind and positioned the painting vertically because the photo is vertical. So it's just it offers some more insight into his creative process, and just something else that we can share and with our visitors.
Yeah, I think those notebooks are an amazing discovery, and a way for us who visit his work, to really have an insider's view of his thinking. And the other thing that I was thinking of that I think is worthy of mentioning is his use of color. It's really it's adventuresome. It's wild. It's titillating. It's unabashed. And I would suggest to everyone that if you look at historic beadwork and ribbon work, and historic and contemporary, you're going to see that same kind of energy and free use of color. I think that was very important to him. And then one last thing I would say about Indian Territory, Oklahoma. Historically, I think when we think about 60 different tribal communities, all forced into one area and required to live side by side, that it fosters a kind of creativity and lawlessness and invention. And I think that those are three characteristics of that period of time, which really provided the foundation for the artist and his practice. It's been a pleasure to discover new things about Leon Polk Smith, and to really be able to pair and present to the public view this correlation between native aesthetics and hard edge contemporary work. And I do hope the public enjoys it as much as Diana and I have enjoyed thinking about it, working on it, putting it together.
And Joe, you bring up a good point there, and one that I wanted to reinforce. Even though we did discover that some other scholars had written about the importance of Oklahoma, this is the first exhibit to actually explore that. And so this is an exhibit that originated at the Herd, and the first one to do that. I wanted to just discuss hard edge art, the hard edge art movement, which emphasized these geometric shapes and bold colors that you've talked about. But I thought it would be interesting to also consider what other art forms were prominent at the time that Leon Polk Smith started this work. And the one that I think of is abstract expressionism. And
Right.
Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, the two movements of abstract expressionism, which is a post World War II movement, which is really centered in New York, and it roughly spans that period, 1940s and 1950s. Hard edge abstraction, of which Leon Polk Smith is an expression of that movement, 1950s to 1960s. So really, there's an overlap. The abstract expressionists being emotional, expressive, spontaneous, the hard edge abstractionists being geometric and studied and minimal. So they're very different kinds of expressions, but they do overlap for a period of time. And of course, probably the best known abstract expressionist would be Jackson Pollock, and also William de Kooning. And then other geometric abstract artists, Ellsworth Kelly, is probably the one name that comes up most frequently, although there are others. So you see these two movements coming from very different perspectives, but overlapping in time.
And you know, we were talking earlier because Leon Polk Smith lived to be 90. There's one painting, is a work on canvas in the exhibit that was created in the last year of his life. And you were pointing out, Joe, that that he stayed with this same art form and for most of his career. His career covered about 7 decades, but some artists change, but in fact he continued in that same style of art.
Yeah.
once he adapted it.
Once he just made that discovery in the 1940s, he was very consistent. And one other thing that I thought to share regarding his sort of the insider view of his work. When I was at the showroom studio and house, I found in a shoebox a series of Polaroid photographs. They were kind of odd in that they were photographs of the exterior of the house. But what was fascinating was that there were extensive notes taken. They were photographs of shadows, given the date and the time of one view of the house. And so there were other notes accompanying this group of photographs, which it seemed to be that he was studying the light patterns on the exterior of the house so that he could make colored selections for when they painted the house. So it's that kind of thinking, critical thinking, analytical mind that is behind all of these works in all of his expressions. And what we do know from people who knew him, his life partner, Bob Jameson, is that this man, Leon Polk Smith, was a very confident and directed, passionate individual. It's said that you didn't want to be on the wrong side of Leon Polk Smith. He was a man of large stature, and he was forceful. So, you know, he's quite a character, and I'm proud of the fact he's from Oklahoma.
You know, Joe, you and I have talked about the fact that you talk about him being a passionate person. For me, the fact that in the 1930s, post-Depression, he finished college. That there's that story about him walking past a studio in college. He hadn't been interested in art before. He had never done art before, but yet he was interested. He went into the studio, and that set him off on a lifelong interest in art. But I think the thing that that I always really, which kind of amazes me, is that he was from this very small town in Oklahoma in the 1930s, post-Depression, and he travels to New York and goes to graduate school at Columbia. It was not a common thing for folks from small town communities, USA, to make that kind of leap and do that. And I think you and I have talked about that and been interested in that about him.
Well, I think it's interesting, but also I think, you know, another discovery that I made from that general area, Chickasha, Oklahoma, where he grew up, he actually graduated from a town even smaller than Chickasha, Pocasset High School, which was adjacent to Chickasha, Oklahoma. But the entire public school system up in Oklahoma was modeled after the Choctaw Nation's educational program. So and speaking to the Grady County Historical Society director, she was telling me that this small town in Oklahoma, Pocasset, had a very innovative and progressive educational system. And I'm reminded of some of the other amazing people that have come out of that time from Oklahoma. Lloyd Kibanoo, for one, who went on from a small town in Oklahoma to attend and graduate the School for the Art Institute in Chicago, became the founder of the Institute of American Indian Arts in Santa Fe. I'm thinking about the Tall Chiefs, Maria and Marjorie Tall Chief from Pawhuska, Oklahoma, who went on to be these amazing professional ballerinas, prima ballerinas. And then Lynn Riggs, a Cherokee artist, a playwright who wrote, what's the name of the, anyway, it became the underscore of the musical, the Broadway musical, Oklahoma. So unexpected things come from these small places that we don't think much of when we're in the urban centers of the country.
Well, this has been great, and I think Allison, that Joe, is it a good time to see if anyone has some questions?
Yeah,
Sure.
I think so. Anyone, if you want, you can either put your questions in the chat box or the Q&A that's down at the bottom. I will check both of them. I did see one quick question that I can answer, which is about the paintings, if they are in black frames or are they shown that way? And it is just in the PowerPoint for this presentation. The paintings in person are not in frames, and they are gorgeous. And some of them are just, you stand and you feel overwhelmingly like just in all of them, and specifically for like Constellation, Yellow, Blue, Violet, and Inca, the last two pictures that were, or the last two paintings that were shown, those, have the canvases are those pieces. So those are all each individual canvases. So definitely worth a look. So anyone else like to go ahead and submit your questions? Now is the time to do so. So I'll just see. A question about the catalog. Yes, there is a catalog for sale. It is 10% off for members, and you can either buy it online at herdshops.com or you can come in person. We also have wonderful merchandise, including an apron, a jigsaw puzzle, these plates, posters, t-shirts. They're all really fun and great items for your home, for yourself, or gifts for others. And those are also available in our shop, and they'll be on our website as well, probably later this evening or tomorrow morning. So a question for both Diana and Joe: how much time did you spend developing this exhibition?
Well, we spent well over 1 year in process. It wasn't. It was about a year ago, in January, that David Roche and I were walking around New York City, visiting the foundation and looking at the work in the collection there. And so it's been fairly steady from that time forward. And I might say this is my very first exhibition to curate virtually, because we're in the COVID world, and gee, it's a strange kind of thing. I mean, I would be there in person otherwise,
Yeah.
But it's challenging times, but I think we make the best of it, and I think we've done a really good job of bringing together the complexity of his life's work.
Yeah. And how many objects paintings are in the exhibition? Do maybe Diana, that's...
There are 37 paintings.
That's
I don't
great.
remember.
37 works of art over
Right. some
a period of 7 decades.
yeah, and some are actually works on paper. They're Cherokee Sunrise is cut paper on paper.
Okay, just looking for a few more questions. Where else is Leon Polk Smith's work represented? In museums, other collections?
You know, his work is very widely distributed in American museums, and also going through the notebooks, it was possible to see. They're also in the UK, Switzerland, Berlin. A lot of his works are in U.S. museums.
Yeah,
we have representations from the Brooklyn Museum, the Whitney Museum, the Dallas Museum of Art, and in Oklahoma, a museum in Oklahoma as well that Joe mentioned.
Okay, well, I think that's about it, unless anyone has another question. We do have a couple comments. They're not necessarily questions, but a lot of our members that I think you'll recognize just saying, you know, what a great
I
job.
see
And
that
it's been
name,
so
Jenny.
wonderful. Yeah, it's been so wonderful to
Barbara
see you back.
Johnson.
Yeah. Barbara Johnson, we have Wendy Weston here, and, you know, Jenny.
Wendy Weston, yeah, it's great.
Yeah,
It's great
yeah.
to see that name.
They're all
Yeah.
saying hello, and it's great to see you back at the herd. And oh, I do, one more quick question. Does Leon Polk Smith discuss the meaning of any of his pieces? What they represent other than form and line and color and...
No, he makes reference to, he speaks to titles that he's selected for his works.
Yeah.
But he doesn't speak directly about this one particular work means this, you know, it's more oblique than that.
Great. And then last question is, are there any of Leon Polk Smith's work in our collection?
No, we have a wonderful selection of publications, and our good friend Norman Sandfield has purchased some rather obscure catalogs and wonderful new additions to the Herd Library as well.
Well, great. With that, I'm going to wrap it up. This webinar is being recorded, so we will post this online in about a week. It'll be on our YouTube channel, so you can go ahead and check it out then. We do have all of our previous virtual art talks there, and we will have 3 more Leon Polk Smith specific virtual art talks, at least in the next coming weeks and months. Those will include one on Wednesday, March 10th. It'll be a deeper look into Leon Polk Smith's artistic practice. That'll be a conversation with Brooke Rappaport. Diana will be back for that one, and Patterson Sims and Dana Miller. I'm just double checking my details here, making sure I got that right. But again, all those are in our song. We will also have them up on the website and our Facebook page pretty soon, so you'll get all those details there. So it's always been a pleasure. Thank you so much, Diana and Joe. It's been great talking with you both, and the exhibition is beautiful. Again, I really hope you are all coming down to see it in person. There's nothing like it other than to see it in person. So thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks to everyone.
Thank you. Thank you,
Bye-bye,
Joe.
Phoenix. Herd Museum.
Bye.
Yeah.